Welcome to part 4 of the Unit 5 exam review. So what else can lead to evolution? Here are mechanisms of evolution besides natural selection. The first one is gene flow. So the movement of alleles or genes from one population to another population. And we can clearly see it in this example here of the birds moving from one to another. What affects gene flow would be mobility, so the ability to move. If we say that there are mainland mice, okay, they can swim to the closest island, but islands very far away will not have those mice because they will die off before reaching those faraway islands. Then natural barriers would be another one. Mountains, rivers, usually these populations of or species, they tend to stay in their own niche, okay, and they don't leave that area. Now, the environment can also affect it, which would be the wind, for example. Migrating birds can be blown off course and then they populate a new island. The second one would be genetic drift. So genetic drift is an umbrella term. There's going to be two types we're going to be looking at, but let's define it first. Genetic drift is a random change in allele frequencies that occurs in small populations due to chance. So unlike natural selection, it happens by chance, one, either caused by big events like overhunting or a natural disaster. And it doesn't work to produce adaptations. Remember, inherited characteristics that increases the likelihood of survival and passing on of those traits. So that is just natural selection. They could change the population for the worse and the species die off. So how does genetic drift occur? In each generation, some individuals may, just by chance, leave behind a few more descendants and genes, in that case, than other individuals. The genes of the next generation will be the genes of the lucky individuals, not necessarily the healthier or better of the individual. Remember, not an adaptation, y'all. It happens to all populations. There's no avoiding chance events. So you can see this example with the bottleneck effect, and we're going to go over that on the next slide. So there are two processes that can lead to genetic drift. The first one would be the bottleneck effect. So it is an event that drastically reduces the size of the population, and that population makes up the next generation. We can see that here. Okay, so that is called the bottleneck effect, usually caused by some natural disaster. Okay, so again, I think of bottleneck effect, natural disaster, or overhunting, or whatever the case. Now, the second one is the founder effect, genetic drift that occurs after a small number of individuals colonize a new area. For this example, we see a diverse set of flowers. We have some red here in the back, some orange in the front, yellow, and blue. So a bird picks up only yellow and blue flowers to a new area. And in this new area, the flowers, the bloom would only be yellow and blue. Okay, so there we have it, yellow and blue. So speciation, we're going to cover that next. So what is the definition of speciation? Well, it is the formation of a new species. Remember, the definition of a species is a group of organisms that breed with one another and produce fertile offspring. That's the key. If they produce infertile, then they're necessarily not a species and they can't create a new population of that species because none of the offsprings are fertile. So how does this occur? Well, it starts with the gene pools of two populations that has become separated, and so they are now new species. As new species evolve, populations become reproductively isolated. And then what does this mean? This means that members of two populations cannot interbreed and produce fertile offspring. So again, they are now considered two different ones. Reproductive isolation occurs when members of different populations can no longer mate successfully. So there are three types of isolation: behavioral, geographic, and temporal. In order to determine the difference between the three, we must use the English language to help us with that description. We're going to cover each one on the following slides. So, behavioral isolation. Again, behavioral simply means that the populations cannot interbreed because they behave differently during their reproductive strategies. So, the courtship may be different, or they just act different when looking for a mate. So, the example would be the eastern and western meadowlarks. Members of two species will not mate with each other partly because they use different songs to attract their mates. The eastern meadowlarks will not respond to western meadowlarks' songs and vice versa. The second one would be the geographic, and you guessed it, is due to having to be in different areas that's separated by a physical barrier, like a river, mountain, or bodies of water. The example would be the Abert and Kaibab squirrels. About 10,000 years ago, the Colorado River split the species into two separate populations. Two separate gene pools formed, and then natural selection did its thing separately, and then each group led to a different formation of a distinct subspecies. Okay, so different squirrels. Temporal isolation, as you guys can guess it, deals with time. So the isolation is a result of two populations reproducing at different times. The primary examples would be of plants. So there are three similar species of orchids that all live in the same rainforest. Each species releases pollen only on a single day. So because the three species release pollen on different days, they cannot pollinate one another. We're now going to cover patterns of evolution. There are six patterns of evolution: extinction, convergent evolution, divergent evolution, gradualism, punctuated equilibrium, and coevolution. The first type of pattern is extinction. More than 99% of all species that have ever lived are extinct. So extinctions happen because species compete for resources and also due to environmental change. Some species adapt and change, others gradually become extinct in ways that are often caused by natural selection. So when these disappearances occur, these disappearance leaves habitats open and provide ecological opportunities for other organisms that survived. The result is often the burst of evolution that produces many new species. The extinction of the dinosaurs cleared the way for the evolution of modern mammals and birds. The second pattern is convergent evolution. This is a process by which unrelated organisms come to resemble one another, aka analogous structures. Remember, analogous means different structure and same function. So, number one, natural selection may mold different body structures, such as arms and legs, into modified forms, such as wings or flippers. The wings or flippers function in the same way, but look very similar. The similar nature of the wings of insects, birds, pterosaurs, and bats are the same, again, function, but very similar structures, but they look very different and they are, um, evolved independently from one another. So they're not from a common winged ancestor. Divergent evolution is the process of two or more unrelated species becoming more and more dissimilar. So this again is homologous structures. Same structure, different function. So a single species or a small group of species have evolved through natural selection and other processes into diverse forms that live in different ways. The vertebrate limb is one example of divergent evolution. The limb in many different species has a common origin, but has diverged somewhat in overall structure and function. So how quickly does evolution occur? There's one that's called gradualism, and if we were to graph gradualism, evolution on the y-axis, time on the x, is a line, very gradual. Now, punctuated equilibrium would be long periods of stability interrupted by rapid change, and long periods again, rapid change, long periods of stability again. So let's think about this. How did a tiger get its stripes? Gradually with a huge and quick change, right? Same thing with these butterflies here. We have the gradual change, okay, versus punctuated equilibrium. So again, boom, periods of stability, and then again, um, many different forms. Coevolution. So coevolution is the process in which two or more species evolve in response to changes in each other. So this is a very good example right here. The plant has pores that secrete nectar for the ants, and so the ants are considered to be, um, feeding off of it. And then the ants live in the thorns and evolve herbivore defense behaviors to protect the plants. So again, the ant act as its protector by living in these hollow thorns. Let's go over the most common misconceptions of evolution. Humans did not come from monkeys. Instead, humans and primates share a common ancestor. That's key, a common ancestor. Darwin is not the only evolutionary theorist. Darwin utilized evidence from other evolutionists to draw his conclusions of natural selection. Now, evolution does not happen quickly. Okay, that's another misconception. Generations of time is required. Okay, now, the last one. Change does not occur at the individual level. It occurs at the population level. So one individual that inherited a characteristic cannot be said to be the evolution of the human race or that species alone. It must be passed on from one generation to the next at the population level. Okay, y'all, that's it for the exam review. I hope that you guys are well prepared. You got this, y'all. Have a good one.